Okay, welcome folks to episode 24 of Clips of the Day. Ty and I have taken a multi-month break, mainly Ty, because there was actual basketball going on.
Yeah, we played a little basketball, and then you moved across the country. Don't forget that.
I did, yeah. I did. I'm in Halifax, and you're in Calgary, but technology allows us to be together here. So
that's right. Yeah,
we did 23 during the time when we didn't have basketball. We were pretty productive. I thought it was more around 18, 19, but we pumped 23 through.
Yeah.
And the last one we did was breaking down the Cowboys, Seabirds, and Steelers, and why the Steelers were the best team in that group, right?
I only talk NFL draft.
Okay, so well, our guest today,
Cowboys are no longer relevant.
Our guest today might have some opinion on all of this, but let's get to that. So we brought the Clips of the Day back because we've got an opportunity to present the new Raptors assistant coach, Chris Finch, to CBA Nation. Chris, welcome to Clips of the Day.
Thank you, Ron. Excited to be here.
It's great. Straight from Treasure Island, Florida.
Yeah, I mean, how lucky am I not only get signed on with the Raptors, which is a first-class organization, but just so happened they relocated to my off-season home. So it's a double win. It's really actually weird to come home to my place, in the summertime, but I'm here in the winter, so I'm really never here, but it still feels like home.
Yeah, for sure. It's odd, and I guess I would connect that to how I was fortunate enough to work with Chris from 2007 to 2012 as a director of basketball operations for the British men's and women's teams. Chris was the head coach from 2006 to 2012, led our program into the Olympic Games in London. And now I am on my way to Tampa Bay.
Right, you are.
Go figure. I'm on my way in February, and it's funny. One of the things that Chris said to me recently, we had kind of the fourth person in this group, Nick Nurse, which we'll talk about obviously here in a moment, Chris Finch, Ron Watilla, and there was a gentleman named Chris Spice, who was our high performance director. If we could get him down to Tampa, we'd have a reunion.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Some good times and good conversations. So yeah, thrilled, Chris, on behalf of all Canadians, frankly, to have you on board of the country's team. They may be called the Toronto Raptors, but certainly the nation is behind the Raptors 100%. And that championship year was an incredible run for the whole nation. I know Nick talks quite a bit about coaching Canada's team as an incredible honor, and there's a lot of juice in it for sure. I think we'd like to just spend a bit of time in a snapshot, Chris, of mapping out your basketball journey. And I've missed lots of stuff here, but I'll walk through it, and maybe you can chime in around any part of this as you wish. You as a player in Pennsylvania, right? Born in Ohio, high school in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, born in Ohio, grew up in Pennsylvania. Pretty much moved there when I was about a year old. So Pennsylvania is definitely home.
And Franklin and Marshall, Division III, was that, going back in time, was that your target, or were you thinking about other options, higher level?
I mean, it wasn't my target at all. I was recruited by a lot of small to mid-major programs, the couple Ivy Leagues, the William and Marys, the Lehighs, the Lafayettes, these types of programs, mostly in high academic standing. Colgate. Well, Colgate's an interesting one. They had offered, at the time, they didn't actually have scholarships. So they didn't know, but they recruited me hard. But they were 2 and 23, like back-to-back years, just awful. And we always were successful. Went to the state championships in high school, and I just didn't want to go to a program where I wasn't going to win. And I really wanted to go to Penn or Princeton. Those were my two choices. I had gone to all of Pete Carrill's camps at Princeton when growing up. He's actually from my area, so there was a big connection. Just didn't make quite the grade to get there. A lot of the other places I targeted, the William and Mary's, Rice was one of them. Like these, they just I don't know if it was good or bad, but coaches kept getting fired and new coaches it wasn't on their radar. So
right.
my dad was the small college administrator, and I was really only recruited by 3 Division III colleges, and Franklin and Marshall happened to be one. Excuse me. My father's was another, and then a school in upstate New York recruited me. And Franklin and Marshall, a bit of a national presence in the Division III landscape, and they were right down the road, and there was just something about the school that I liked, and so I chose it. I was fortunate with my father in higher education. I didn't need a scholarship. They had what they call tuition exchange waivers, where it's kind of like you go to school for free if your parents work in higher education. And not every school participates in the program, but several hundred of them do, and Franklin Marshall happened to be one of them. So it was probably, I always say the 2 best decisions I made was going to Franklin Marshall and staying in Franklin Marshall. One of the schools that recruited me was American University. Yeah. When I went to F&M, we were really good, but we just weren't, just sports just at that weren't as, I came from a big time high school program. So sports at college, at Franklin and Marshall just weren't that, it was kind of a brainiac school. Right. Kids didn't really get into sports, Yeah. So the whole experience was different. So I almost transferred to American, but decided at the last moment to stay. And, that was probably the biggest decision, because my career just kind of took. I started as a freshman. I, played a lot. I had a great college coach. My coach in college, retired all-time Division III wins. Record holder of something like 900 and some. Only job he ever had. He held it for like 48 years or something ridiculous like that. And when we were, I see you see my record. I think we were we went to the final 8 a couple times. We lost in the final game one time. I had a great career, played with some really good players, was coached by an outstanding coach. So basketball wise, it was
good call.
It was great. Yeah,
for sure. And I put the record because Ty is proud of how much he won in high school. So I think I got, a couple of kindred spirits here, a lot of wins.
Yeah. I at the time that I graduated, I held 2 records in the NCAA. One, most wins as a starter, and I think most wins overall or something like that.
That's what I picked up as I was doing my research.
Probably not the case now, but at the time it was.
That's good. And then how about this stretch here from going over to Britain to playing through to maybe let's just kind of pause it before the Great Britain Olympics. Yeah. That whole journey of Britain player, Britain pro, and then into Germany and Belgium.
Yeah. Well, I came out of school. Actually, the first job I had within basketball, I don't even know if you know this, Ron, maybe we talked about it. I had signed a contract to play for the Washington Generals.
I do remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but at the time they went the Globetrotters went bankrupt. They're actually independent teams, but the Generals have a contract with, the Trotters to play them. So they went bankrupt, and that kind of left me working in corporate world for a year. And then I got another chance to go over and play in pro basketball with an expansion franchise with Sheffield Sharks. And they actually were a Division II team for a year, and then we got promoted up into the top division. Went well, great organization that I worked at. And when I was 27, our coach decided to take another job. He went to Manchester, our big rival. And the family that kind of owned or ran the team at the time more asked me if I wanted to be the head coach. And so it was an opportunity I knew I couldn't turn down, just because I knew I wanted to be in coaching. And at that age, who's going to get that type of experience? And so I stayed there 6 years coaching, and probably the 6 most formative years because we had some success, had a good amount of success, but they really the family allowed me to like grow and fail and be a jerk and all these things you learn when you're young, and they were very supportive of me. We had really kind of reached everything we could do there, and the game was like starting to claw the money back. There was a lot of money in the game for a little while, but they had mismanaged the TV deal, and they just kind of were now asking us to do more with less all the time, and it just kind of took a little bit of the fun, and it was time to go. So I was approached by a team in Germany, small budget team, but it was, it was the right move. And it's interesting, Ron, like a lot of my steps, I tell this to people all the time, like everywhere, when I went to Germany, I took a pay cut. I was only there 1 year. I got fired. I had to take another pay cut to go Belgium. I built my career back up in Belgium over 5 years. And that was really kind of like the meteoric rise of it, because we had success playing in European leagues. We won the league in Belgium my first year. Went to Europe the following year with a really good team, kind of upstarts. I think we went to the quarterfinals of the ULEB Cup at the time, lost to Jerusalem. Couple years into that, had some financial difficulties at the club, went to a different club, Mons, in the French part, again, had a bunch of success, again, did well in Europe. And it was kind of that whole thing that really crystallized my coaching philosophy with the way that we play. And it was, and I can come around to that later, but it really kind of, it wasn't about like playing fast or efficient. It was about being able to afford players that could compete. And that just happened to be smaller, undersized guys against these bigger guys in Europe. We were kind of running circles around them, if you will. Yeah. So a lot of things happened there. But then when I got the opportunity to then go to the G League, I took another pay cut again. So right. I tell people all the time, like, you never, in coaching in particular, never should chase money. You should always chase opportunity. Because if you're successful, and it's easy to tell in coaching if you're successful or not, you're gonna reap the rewards.
Yeah. Yeah. No, great message. And then, obviously with these couple good looking guys on the bench, you knew that there was bright times in the 6 years you spent leading Great Britain into the London Games. I mean, we could talk for hours about that journey. We could cry, we could cheer, we could do all of it. Well, what are your, with Nick Nurse, for people who aren't aware, Nick was the lead assistant with the GB team for, I think, 4 of those 6 years. I was the director of basketball operations for 5 of them. Just comments and thoughts around that time with GB leading into the games, with leading a country really that doesn't have a basketball heritage.
Yeah. I mean, nothing but outstanding, fond memories, pure joy. I always our players, Ron, they played everywhere. They played from the NBA to Spain to all around the world. And one of the neat things about being in that setting was it's the only time that British basketball players, those guys in particular, rather, got to play with other countrymen.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that those guys ever had a bad day. I mean, normal player moans here and there, but they really enjoyed playing with each other, laughing, kidding each other about their soccer teams and their affiliations and all this stuff that they don't get to normally do with their teammates, because they're basically exports, really. So, building the organization up from scratch was, I think, one of the, I think something we're still very proud of, and wish we had more of a legacy, but we don't. But what we were able to accomplish on the admin and the professionalism of what we did and how we did it, I thought was impressive. That first year before you came on board, when my brother was involved, just on a voluntary basis, we took this flight to our first tournament in Sweden, and we kind of picked the program up and running. The organization at the time didn't want much to do with it because there was a lot of politics. Wasn't sure where they wanted us to succeed or fail, to be frank, because if it failed, it may have reflected on them being able to gain control. Just kind of crazy stuff like that. But nonetheless, we just kind of, we're total blank slate, and we have this, we've got on the back of like I think an envelope, and we just said, hey, these are the things we got to do better next time. I mean, we haven't even played game one, and we're already thinking about the future.
But didn't you call that if there is another year? Or
yeah, if there is another year. Yeah, because we weren't sure what was going on. Yeah.
Cool. So, and how about the whole, the journey from the G League? For those that don't know, Chris coach of Rio Grande had lots of success, was pulled up into Houston, and then made his way from Houston to Denver to New Orleans. Walk us through the highlights of that journey, Chris.
Yeah, that was probably, that came at the perfect time in my career, because, I had kind of figured out who I was as a coach, was very comfortable with that. And, between the Olympics and, what you and Chris Spice were asking us to do, and Chris was excellent with coach leadership, which, I try to employ a lot of things that he taught me into the things that we've worked on in recent years on this side of the pond. And also with the Rockets, just, they were like, okay, we know who you are. That's why we hired you. We love the fundamentals, the basics of what you're doing, your philosophy. Now let's push it to the extreme. And they just challenged myself, and they challenged Nick too, to just get outside our comfort zone, think of new things that we can try in the D League that we necessarily weren't prepared, or the big club wasn't prepared to try in the NBA. And let's see if it works. Let's measure it. Let's test it. Let's think on it and evaluate it. And what we're talking about is style of play, offensively. And then when Nick followed me, they asked him to focus on the defense, because he had a strong defensive acumen. So we both get these reputations as an offensive or a defensive guy. It's primarily because the Rockets asked us to really dig deep into those worlds. Right. Before that, we thought of ourselves as we coached everything on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's a good segue into Ty. Ty had some questions around your coaching philosophy and how you look at the game, and because we're going to see it here with the Raptors, we're going to be curious about how the Raptors maybe look a little bit different than they have in the past. So Ty, over to you to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a long question to answer, but what would your offensive philosophy be, so to speak, and maybe compared to some others, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I think some of the things I'm trying to maybe tweak around the edges here is I'd like this to get a little more pace. I think they were kind of a middle of the road team when it comes to pace. They were very good in transition scoring. A lot of that was off their excellent defense. I think we can be a little faster in other facets of the game, like maybe pushing harder after made baskets and even defensive rebounds. So I'd like to get a little bit more open court play. And also we're just going to have to kind of work on our spacing, just maybe space the floor a little differently than they had done it in the past. They had, Mark Gasol in the middle of the floor where they're able to use him as a pivot point and play around him. Mm-hmm. We don't have the same dynamic. We're going to have to try to open up driving lines for Pascal and some of the other perimeter players a little bit more. But, we love randomness. We like playing out of concepts rather than patterns. And then we are pretty adhered to the shot selection that we believe in, which is getting to the rim, generating the free throws that are resultant from being aggressive in the paint, and also then creating open threes. And Nick and I believe very closely in these things. It's just the roadmap each year in each team is a little different, and there's enough flexibility in the system. When you have a concept-based system, it's a lot easier to kind of massage it to your personnel than if you have a lot of strict sets and patterns and these types of things. So.
That's interesting. So you, just because you lost those two big guys, from last year, even though I know you weren't there last year, but
Yeah.
The new guys you brought in, you can, your system, you can tailor it to those guys, even though, they have different skill sets maybe.
Yeah. So generally, like what I've found when you give players more freedom rather than less is that they tend to gravitate to what they do best. So in that way, they will show you if you watch them play without a lot of rules, or without a lot of hard and fast rules, they'll tend to gravitate to things that they do well and they're comfortable doing. And as you watch these things unfold, they'll teach you a lot about themselves and the team around them. And so every year it could be a little different. And, I think it's a mistake when you try to like force them to play into a role that was vacated by somebody else who's different. Right. I mean, there's filling the void of scoring is always easy. Like there's a lot of guys who want to do that, and everyone thinks they can, and, and a good number of them actually can. So, but getting them to understand how to space the floor, read the floor, think about the plays 2 passes ahead, kind of raise everyone's collective basketball IQ, if you will. That's what really gets me excited. Like when I can see that process unfolding in front of me. And then the other side of it is like when you give guys a lot of freedom, when they do things that they're not very adept at, that's obvious. It sticks out like a sore thumb. So it's easier than I believe to kind of nudge them to the direction you want them.
Is that the accountability factor? Like, as a coach, when you hear freedom, maybe some coaches are a little bit nervous. Well, how do I hold my players accountable if I'm giving them freedom?
Yeah. Well, I mean, absolutely. Having freedom, you're also giving them responsibility. And, it's not a democracy. I tell these guys all like, hey, like your freedom may be you can do A, B, or C, and right. Somebody else's freedom is they can do A or B, and someone else's freedom is they can do A to Z. It's obvious Anthony Davis is going to have far more freedom, not because he's a superstar player. It's because he has the skill sets to do more things, you know? And the first part of like making an effective player, or like we like to talk about now, a really efficient player, is like shedding the things they don't do well, like stick to the things that they do well. A lot of guys are like, they don't shoot particularly well. They want to prove that they can shoot well, so they shoot more shots. We see this all the time. And when it comes to shooting, that's a great example. People ask me all the time, last year our staff did a really good job of, helping Lonzo Ball's 3-point shot, helping Brandon Ingram's 3-point shot. I mean, first and foremost, those players put the work in. They put the work in, so they deserve the credit. As coaches, we're just there to guide them. What we told both of them is, if you want to be a better shooter, you got to get rid of the bad shots. Not every shot is the same. Not every 3-point shot is the same. Not every, pull-up is the same. Like, these are the ones that are highly contested. These are the ones that are more open. Like, let's try to play to the ones that are, easier shots. Get rid of the tougher shots. And then right away, your percentage is going to go up. And then it's just a process from there.
This is a hard question. Is that an easy conversation to have with athletes at that level?
Great question. I find it easy. The way I approach it is, I try to approach it in a disarming manner. Like, we're not trying to change their games. Like, my standard line to them, and Ron's probably heard me say this before, is that, you're already wearing an Armani suit. Like, my job is just to tailor it. Like, we don't want, your game is like sharp. You got a great game, but like, we're just going to make it look like, it's not off the rack. And if they want to be good and they want to, get paid, because that's what all these guys want to do, is ultimately get paid, raise their value in the marketplace is something that resonates with them. This is the way to do it. If you can score 20 points on less shots, everybody loves that. If you can generate more free throws, that makes your teammates better because they're getting to the line when you're in the bonus. So your value by just tweaking your style of play can be greatly affected.
So they trust that you have their best interest at heart as well as the team's. kind of
Yeah, that's one of the lessons I learned early on when I came over to the D League. When Europe is a lot more like, I would say, the college system here in North America. The coach has got a strong word. He's kind of the cult of personality, if you will. His word goes. Over here in the professional game, like, you really have to explain the why to the players. Like, they're not listening just because you're the coach. They want to know, A, that you know what you're talking about, B, that you can help them win and be better at a high level. And, they really want to know that you're as invested in their individual career as you are in winning the game, which is kind of when you're coming in from the environment like Europe or the college game, it's very foreign, and it takes some getting used to, because it's not that the player's questioning you. You're equals in this game now. I mean, he has to trust that you're gonna, try to deliver the right game plan, the right philosophy, the right, end of game play, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, like, you guys it's really a partnership.
That's really cool.
I mean, coaching right now in the professional game is kind of the ultimate middle management job. It really is. I mean, the players make more money, and in a lot of ways they have more power. Front offices are ever expanding, and they're getting smarter by the day. They have a lot more lenses which they can look at the game through, and then they're pressuring you to play more efficient, play faster, play this guy, don't play that guy. There's all this kind of stuff that we're dealing with from both ends, and we're really we got to be able to earn respect, hold accountability, build relationships, and deliver the basketball part.
We'll swing into questions about players in a second, Chris, but I want to ask you a question about coaching before we move there, and Ty digs into the advice you have for younger players. You've always leaned into taking risks. That's what I've seen. And I remember you saying to me, I wish that FIBA hadn't made us keep hitting these or these targets. And then well, I don't care if this is public, they moved the targets.
Yeah.
Right. So we would hit a target and we would give each other a high five. And then I come back and say, well, actually, just so that that people watching know, basketball's the only team sport where the host nation doesn't automatically get their spot. We had to prove we were worthy in it. We had about 3 different targets to hit. You remember you saying, I just wish that we had some security so we could experiment a little bit.
Yeah.
What would you say to coaches who maybe in a cone of silence say, I'm really nervous about taking risks and being creative? Because I know that, well, Nick is known for that across the country, and I know you well enough to know that you thrive with that concept.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as coaches, we are by nature very conservative. We do the things that we've always done because we believe they bring us some level of results. So the first thing you got to do is think about is like, is this really working?
Mm-hmm.
Is it really working? Like, we think it might be working, but we don't know. So what are the mechanisms that's what analytics is like showing us right now, is like basically telling us like these things are working or they're not working. And there's a natural distrust for analytics in the game. And I understand why it's, because there's still basketball, there's still this connective tissue that can't be measured. That stuff still exists. But if you can find a mechanism to figure out objectively what you're doing is working or not, then, put it under a microscope, see how it holds up. I mean, that's one thing. 2 is like, what do you have to lose if you're coaching youth sports or even at the high school level? I mean, I know we're all feel like we're coaching for our jobs, and oftentimes we might be, but what do you have to lose? Like, you might as well try it. And it's nothing that we're doing is irreversible. If you don't like it, you go back. I mean, the biggest thing is like when you're going to try something, like you gotta put enough of your heart and soul into learning about it. You don't have to have all the answers. Like, you'll figure out some of the stuff along the way if you pay attention. But I think you got to be invested in it enough that your players believe what you're selling to them.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons I feel like I've had success is because I believe with my heart and soul what I'm telling them.
Right.
And then when they ask me questions, I either know the answer and I can give it with conviction, or I think about it and I work through it with them.
Right.
You know, if we're in a discovery phase on something.
Yeah.
So, you know, in that way, like, you're going to learn from your players too.
Right.
You know, and you guys are you're gonna solve, you know, and that goes back to what we were talking about. It's very much a partnership now.
Yeah.
Well,
and don't coach, there's still those coaches though, I think, that struggle with putting the shield down and having that relationship with their players.
Yeah.
I feel as I need to know the answer all the time. I need to look strong all the time. And
yeah. We were just having this conversation. I was just having this conversation with a former player development coach of ours who was with another team now. He called me last night. We were just chit-chatting. And think about teaching, right? Like, there's a lot of teachers out there that are really good teachers, and they're teachers and they can teach because they can teach. Like, and they may be asked to teach something they don't really know, or you know, they may have taught history for 10 years, but all of a sudden there's a need in applied mathematics and they have to move over. And so they're studying the night before, you know, and they're able to deliver it, and they're kind of learning it along the way. Like, basketball is no different. Like, you know, I mean, we're sitting here thinking on my drive to work, like, what drills can I do to sell what I'm thinking about in my head? You know, it's no different.
Yeah.
But you just got, when you step out there in front of your team, just know it and keep it simple enough that you're not going to trip yourself up. You know, you don't have to reinvent the game.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. Well, Ty, over to you to pick Chris's brain on the player side of it.
Yeah, I guess just a player development question for kids, really, you know, junior high school. What if there was two things skill wise that you could say players nowadays would need? Now, obviously you coach a different level of kid, but basketball is basketball. Two things that you would say most players nowadays need to be able to do well.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, shooting. Shooting is one of those things that it's never going to go out of style. It solves a lot of problems on the floor when you can make shots. But what's incredible about shooting is that it's not always taught very well. And most people learn to shoot by themselves, like in a vacuum. They go and that's fine. It's like, it's okay. It's how we learn a lot of things we do in life. But the real kind of head scratcher is that not enough coaches are invested in the shooting process because they have a fear of teaching shooting, because maybe they can't shoot themselves, or that they don't fully understand it, or it's also the thing that hurts shooting development. It's a long-term thing. Like, you can't say, oh, I'm a better shooter because, you know, Tuesday I started doing this and now it's Thursday and I've all of a sudden, you're going to see some maybe gains, but you gotta, it's a long runway. Yeah. And it starts with the basics, and it's very boring. It's very monotonous, and you gotta, you know, you gotta have your form right. You gotta move back slowly, and you gotta have integrity, and you gotta do this, all this stuff. And it's a long process. And I think a lot of coaches are just intimidated. And I'm not talking about just youth coaches. I'm talking about the NBA. Like, we see it all the time. And you don't have to have perfect form. You just have to perfect the form that you have, as long as it's not, you know, such a inhibiting factor in your shooting. You can't be slinging it from your hip when you're 16 years old, you know? And I think that's also part of the problem with shooting in America. Like, we don't grow up playing on 8-foot baskets where you can, with small balls, where you can have a form. Like, to get it to the rim, you have to use all your might.
Yeah.
Now your shooting mechanics out of the gate, where your muscle memory is most vulnerable and most impressionable, is been compromised, you know? So that's one. Two is, I mean, I guess, the game right now is like so fluid, so fast. It really is kind of me, like, moving back to what it should have always been, just like this. I don't want to say positionless, because I still believe that there's like room for bigs and point guards and everybody. It doesn't matter who you are, like, but understanding space and spacing concept is also really huge. Just like that, learning to play without the ball is another way of saying it. Like, everyone wants to play with the ball, but those players that can play without the ball, like, if you can play well without the ball, you're probably also a really good passer, because you can see things like developing. And and the only way to really teach that is play short-sided games. A lot of 3-on-3, 4-on-3, 4-on-4, like just play. Like 3-on-3 is the best way to learn to play basketball, because it's, the concepts, it's basically, basketball is a 3-man game with other people standing around creating space.
Right.
This was a setup question. Ty, you called Chris beforehand. Because Chris Ty has done such a good job in our club of teaching the off-ball side of the game.
Oh, excellent.
And we're, as you I don't need to tell you this. I mean, there's all of this on-ball training going on right now in the sport of basketball, where you're learning all this stuff. And I have one of our children benefited greatly from doing a lot of ball handling work with a coach in Calgary. But what's missing, and Ty picked it up right away as soon as he entered into our club, was all these kids don't know what to do when the ball's on the other side of the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. It's really the essence of the game, right? Like one of my big sayings is share the floor, share the ball. It's not share the floor, period, share the ball. It's share the floor, comma, share the ball. And that's meaning if we share the floor, we space properly, the ball will move because we'll see easily where the passes should go. Mm-hmm. Right? Like what really kind of shuts down more passing windows is bad spacing. So then what happens? People want to dribble more, so now the game gets all gummed up. So if we share the ball, I learned this in the NBA, as you get higher level defenses, they are scheming and they're trying to take certain things away, but we can expose, or they will tell us right away what they're trying to do if we have great spacing. If we can play off the ball really well.
So when we talk about as coaches, this is my last point. Sure. Or last question. It's just along these lines. When we talk about how do you teach basketball IQ? How do you teach reading defense? I think I'm hearing that the first thing you have to do is learn to space properly.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you space, then you can read the action in front of you. I mean, at our level, we see it all the time. There'll be a ball handler, there'll be some action, and I'll freeze the film and I'll say, look at everybody. And everybody's just looking at the ball.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, the ball will find you. I promise it. It's an object that everybody wants to have. And, it's not going to hit you on the side of the head if you're not looking at it. Look what your teammate's doing. He's trying to screen for you. Look what you should be cutting here because your man is on top of the play. But you're not seeing that because you're just looking at the ball. You got to have a perspective. You got to see space,
That's interesting.
Maybe as a closing comment, Chris, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your day for the 300 families in our club who Ty and I care deeply about. We have young. I'm going to go back to the very start of this time with you. We have a number of young people who have the talent and who are willing to work hard enough to play at the next level, college, university, mostly in Canada. The odd kid is looking south of the border. You made a decision to go to Franklin and Marshall, and you talked to me over the 5 years we spent together in GB about how it impacted you. Forget about the basketball, just about how you look at solving problems and how. What would you tell someone in grade 9, 10, 11 about the decision they need to make to play the next level? Let's just say for sure they're good enough, and what the key what they should be looking for in terms of it having the same impact on them that it had on you and your decision to go to Franklin and Marshall?
I would make it really simple, Ron. And I would just say, go where you have a really good chance to play. So many kids go in over their head and get lost in the shuffle. They get I want to go to Kentucky, Kentucky showed a little interest in me, or I want to go to the North Carolina, or I want to go to, wherever. Go where you can play. I mean, that was really the determining factor for me. I was recruited by, I was actually recruited by Duke. They had made a phone call. They didn't have any great interest in me. I would have been a tail ender who never saw the floor in 4 years, like a kid that I grew up playing with went, and that's how they found me. We played together. And my coach just basically told me, you're not going to go there because you're built to compete. You're built to play. And why I chose Franklin and Marshall, even as Division III, is that they were nationally successful. And I never figured I'd play after college, but I wanted to go somewhere where I could play and I knew we could. It was serious, and we could, maybe win a championship because we had always gone deep in state playoffs. So I didn't want to go play meaningless basketball somewhere.
Yeah.
We saw the British kids do it all the time, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, it was one thing that really hurt our program over there. They would go to play, and it could have been, they could have gone to Coastal Carolina, they could have gone to a mid-major, they could have, nothing against those schools. Those kids just weren't able to crack the rotation. They would have been far better going to a really good Division II school and playing.
Mhm.
Yeah, the young fellow who went to college at Charleston, Andrew.
Yeah.
Great call.
Yeah.
Was a significant player the whole time he was there. Anyways, so we're getting, it's too micro at that moment, but what a great message that is.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter because, like, if you're good enough, I mean, if you're gonna, if you're good enough to play at a high level, like, they'll find you, and if you have a career beyond that and you're good, they'll find you. Like the league, the NBA, and professional opportunities are so, they're so smart now, and they're looking everywhere. You're going to get your chance. So if Kentucky's recruiting you, but you don't feel confident and you got to put your ego aside and everyone's telling you should go there, maybe you should go to Western Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And lead them to a tournament and, get a great experience and continue to build, build up your basketball development because, the Raptors have we were just talking about this today. The Raptors have a great reputation for player development.
Yeah.
The things that they do with their players, like, and the work that everybody puts in, coaches and players, top notch. You know why they're good? They're committed to playing their young players.
Yeah.
If they don't play in the games, and that goes back to why, we in Great Britain, and I'll tie it back to that, is we had to win. We had to have this win now mentality to achieve these objectives. It cost us development opportunities for our young guards.
Yeah.
And that's where our weakness was in the backcourt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we go into the Olympics with a 38-year-old guard. And it was great, but there's nothing left after that, So got to go where you can play.
Yeah, great message. Fantastic. Chris, if you could just hold on the line for a second, I'm gonna say goodbye to our CBA family. Folks, that was Clips of the Day 22 or 24. Ty will come up with if the Steelers were still undefeated, we'd go back to them, but
no, we would not. But that's okay.
Okay. All right, CBA folks. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you all soon.
Yep. Be safe.